Hey everybody, it's Jim here, and this year I have bought and sold many guitars, some of which were bought with the intent of selling when I purchased them. Others were bought specifically for me to keep without ever considering putting them back up for sale. I've narrowed it down to three. We're going to be going over my three favorite guitars, highlighting each one in a brief little manner. Then at the end, I'm going to be telling you what I think is the best of the lot, in my opinion. Now, this is not going to be full-on demo style. I do have individual demos where I deep dive into each one of these guitars when it is appropriate to that specific guitar and I'm talking about it. There will be a link in the top left-hand corner of your screen. If you'd like to learn more or just watch that video, feel free to do so. But I'd like to get started. Since I'm holding the PRS, why don't we start there with the core McCarty. Now, of the three guitars I'm going to be talking about today, the McCarty was the only one that was purchased brand new and thus was the most expensive of the three. But this guitar is absolutely astounding in terms of the craftsmanship of it, the feel of it. Obviously, if we're judging this based on looks alone, I think this one wins hands down. Yeah, I don't even think it's really that close due to my own personal kind of tastes here. But what I love about this guitar, outside of the meaningless things such as the aesthetics at the end of the day, that really doesn't matter all too much. The guitar is so reliable in so many ways. It stays in tune better than pretty much any other humbucker equipped instrument. A lot of it has to do with the way that the strings aren't necessarily as angled as some other brands like the 77 or Gibsons coming out of the nut through to the tuners at the top of the headstock. It is as clear as a bell. This thing, even unplugged, just chimes. It has so much great presence and life to it. You don't always find that, and it doesn't matter what price point that you're looking at. If you can find a guitar that really rings out well acoustically, I'm actually in Paul's camp saying you're off to a really good start, because that's extremely important, and I personally do believe that that will translate to how the guitar is going to sound to a certain effect through an amp. Unless, of course, you're using a whole ton of distortion. But speaking of which, this guitar handles it in spades. It's got the 5815 LT pickups in it, which are a little bit more kind of vintage output to them, but don't let that fool you. This thing with gain is nothing to just shrug off. Sure, it's not as modern sounding as a custom 24, which is going to have the 8515s, a bit more aggressive pickups in those, but this can handle pretty much all the gain I would ever want to throw at it, and I believe it handles gain better than any other guitar that I currently have. But just because guitar is made in America doesn't mean it can't be absolutely outstanding and inspiring in its own right. The next guitar we're going to be going over is this guy, the 77 Albatross. I did purchase this guitar used and for substantially less than either of the other two of them because it doesn't have the brand power associated with either Fender in their custom shop or Paul Reed Smith, but that should not be a deterrent or make you question the quality of these 77 guitars or any of the Divisor brand guitars that are made in Japan. This has the greatest neck that I've ever played on any guitar. It's just absolutely perfect for me and for what I love. I played a Gibson 339, and for a long time I kind of tried to make that be the guitar that took over the status of the Telecaster, because for me, the Telecaster has always been my home base where I felt the most kind of safe, so to speak, because I've just played them for so many years and I wanted to try something different. Eventually, I parted ways with that guitar and I always somewhat regretted it. However, with this guitar, and once I received it, it was all out the window. I was just laughing my way to the bank with all the money I saved, as well as having an instrument that, in my opinion, was far better built and plays far better than the Gibson counterpart that I previously spoke of. This guitar, the fact that it is a one-off, I mean, it is pretty cool in that aspect, but even a production model of one of these Albatrosses, I would assume would be extremely similar. The electronics are still going to be the same. Mojo tone hand-wired pickups, depending on the year that you're buying them in. You're still getting really high-quality Goto hardware on this instrument. It has this incredible sound, even when unplugged, that even the 339 didn't really have. And I thought that guitar did sound extremely good as well once that guitar wasn't even plugged in. And referencing back to the PRS, I mean, that's where you got to start. That's a good baseline, especially what you're talking about, really high-end guitars. It's the little things that matter. It's the sum of the parts. It's the craftsmanship that goes into these guitars that help you not only feel a really high quality instrument, but help that feel really translate to confidence in your playing, and more importantly, inspiration for when you are picking up that specific instrument. And this guitar for me gives me so much inspiration to play things and to try things that I wouldn't normally play on other instruments. And I can't really put a price or quantify that. Now, before I get into my final thoughts and monologue here, ranking all three of these guitars, because I actually am going to put them in order at the end of this video, we got one left. It's old, reliable. It's the Custom Shop Telecaster. When it comes to the Telecaster, I think I've made my feelings on this instrument in general pretty clear. I believe if you're just universally sitting back and looking at the best overall designed instrument of all time, it has to be a Telecaster in my book. It's so honest with you as a player. If you're playing like shit one night, the guitar is going to let you know. It's not going to be able to hide any of that for you. But when you really nail it on one of these guitars, there's really nothing like it. The bridge pickup on this guitar and on any good Telecaster is world class. It is just a sound that cuts right through without being too ice picky. It has presence to it. It's got some balls behind it. It's absolutely amazing. The middle position I have grown over the years to appreciate and love a lot. And then the neck pickup itself, if there was one weakness to a Telecaster, I would say that that would be the area that it kind of doesn't have that really, really killer sound to, but by no means is it a slouch in any sense. It just became a little obvious to me, especially when I've been sitting back and playing these guitars back to back to back to back to back, trying to form a more concrete kind of thought process on what I think the pros and cons of each of these guitars is. But these things never go out of tune. They're bulletproof in that sense. They sound amazing. Find one that has a neck profile that you really like, and just you have a lifer that can cover almost any genre that you throw at it. And one thing I will say about a custom shop Telecaster versus some of the American vintage, the American originals, American professional twos, American standards, I've played and owned all of those variations of the guitars as well. The fingerboards on these are so excessively rolled. It's a really, really amazing feeling neck, especially if you're somebody who does do a lot of thumb over kind of chords and things of that nature. It's just an absolute joy playing rhythm guitar on this guitar. But one thing I have started to notice here, and I know that Callahan makes a bridge itself, an actual full-on bridge. I have the saddles on right now. The E string, if I start really starting to play lead, which is something I've been working on in my practice routine a bit, I've noticed that it kind of slips off a little bit because it is so rolled on the edge of the fingerboard, and that kind of turns me off here and there when I'm doing things like that. Granted, I'll never be a full-on lead guitarist, but it's something that I have absolutely started to notice recently the more that I play this instrument. So, got the basic kind of summaries and our quick sound samples out of the way. Let's get down to brass tacks. The first thing that we're going to hit on is the value. Which one was the best value? This should be extremely obvious once I present the figures. The Paul Reed Smith came in at, I believe, $3,200, which for a new core, it's fairly good. Absolutely nothing to complain about with that. This guitar used was $2,500, and looking at what a new version of a Fender Custom Shop Telecaster would be with similar appointments, a 1960, $3,900, so almost in line with the PRS as far as MSRP goes. This guy, the Albatross, was less than a Vintera new. Now, do I even need to say which one of these was the best value, granted how highly I spoke of all three of these guitars? No, the 77 hands down wins. I mentioned the looks. I know some people, that is genuinely vital to them when making a decision. Paul Reed Smith wins that one hands down. I put the Telecaster second and the 77 third. Not that there's anything wrong with the 77. I'm just a little bit more of a flashy kind of guy in that sense. Playability and build quality. This is where things become a little bit more subjective, and I might surprise you with my opinions on this. Playability-wise and build quality-wise, I'm going to give it to one guitar, with another guitar being very, very close behind it. I would say the 77. This guitar was expertly built, and I think that this brand almost has an unfair advantage here. Because they don't build nearly the same amount of guitars annually that Fender or PRS do, they're able to really dial in and get everything right. They can reject anything that is slightly imperfect. This guitar plays better than either of them. It really does. Build quality, same thing. This has better fretwork than the Paul Reed Smith. There's nothing wrong with the fretwork on this. This just has that little bit of extra when it comes to the filing of the frets and the roundness and the smoothness of the playability of the neck going up and down. This guitar is just out of this world. I cannot believe how good it really is. Which one is my favorite? Do I like the most, and why? We're going to start from the bottom of my rankings here, and then we're going to go up. This is going to be a little bit of a surprise. In third place, I would put the Telecaster. There's nothing wrong with that guitar. I still really genuinely do believe that the best guitar model that you could buy is a Telecaster. But in these three guitars and for where I am as a guitar player, which I'm going to hit on a little bit further into this video, I would put it the third favorite of the three. The second, this was where things really, really got difficult, and I'm going to compare these two specifically for a moment. There is one thing about the 77 Albatross that the PRS does that this cannot match, and that is, notice where my pinky is. I have the same problem with the 339 as I do with the Albatross. I don't notice it all the time because I'm not a real lead player, but upper fret access, you're simply not getting there. And if you are, you're really fighting or contorting your hand in order to do so. Whereas the Paul Reed Smith, you can play this up and down the neck absolutely effortlessly. It's part of the design of the McCarty or any good double cut guitar. There is no weakness to the McCarty at all. But I would put the McCarty second. The reason why is because this guitar, out of the three guitars in this video, in my hands and where I am right now as a guitar player, this is the guitar that inspires me to play, that inspires me to write. Whereas with the Paul Reed Smith, I feel I'm finding these two guitars work extremely well together when writing, because the ideas and the bulk of that kind of composing part I do on this guitar. And once that's kind of done, I'll pick up the McCarty and just put the icing on top of the cake, so to speak. They work so well together. But to me, I feel that having a guitar that really inspires you to write and to play, outside of all the other things that we talked about, the build quality, the finish, all of this, if the guitar is a spectacle in all of those aspects, but when you pick it up, it doesn't make you want to write songs. It doesn't make you want to try things, and just, there's no point. There's really not a point to it. All three of those guitars that you're seeing here do that to an extent, but this one to me right now is the one that I'm getting the most mileage out of it. So my favorite guitar of 2022 that I purchased for myself is the 77 Albatross, beating out the heavyweight Fender Custom Shop Telecaster and the Core PRS McCarty. But before I wrap this up, I want to add a little bit more context to this entire test, and also to why I did put the Telecaster third amongst the other two guitars. This wasn't something I sat down for a day with and came to a snap decision. This has been an ongoing thing of playing each guitar back to back to back, noticing what my tendencies were when I was playing the guitars. What was I practicing? What was I inspired to write? What was I inspired to actually do with each one in my hands? Telecaster for me has always felt like home because it's a guitar that I've had as my main guitar in some variation pretty much forever outside of the Strat. It feels like home. It's something that, because of that, I almost feel myself more likely to go back into my comfort zone and to things that I already know. When it comes to the 77 more specifically, I feel myself trying new things, especially different techniques. Things like kind of chordal tapping is something that I've really started to get into, and I feel like it's a strong suit of that guitar, not just because acoustically and even plugged in, because it's a semi-hollow body guitar, it's got a little bit more kind of presence and sustain to it. It sounds better to do it on that guitar, but it's not a guitar that I've had my whole life, so I'm more apt to wanting to try things new on it. I still love this guitar. I still love Telecasters in general. This is not made in any sort of slight to it, but at the current moment, I mean, maybe it's time. The cyclical thing of being a guitar player, playing different instruments in different periods, and taking your inspiration to places that may not have gone before. The guitar is maybe going to be on the back burner a little bit more than it previously had been. But that's all I have for you guys today. If you were surprised by these results, let me know in the comments down below. If you could have any one of these three guitars, which one would you pick and why? But thank you for watching this video. I enjoy all of your support, especially if you're somebody who made it all the way to the end of today's content. I love you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'm going to get going. Take care.